So we're here to talk about interviews. Put in the chat if you have had an interview, if you have an interview scheduled for this week, next week, tomorrow, today. Just say yes or no. Great. Have any of you had interviews already? Could you put that in the chat? Cool. All right. So the first thing I want you to do is to do a little happy dance, right? Your resume did what it needed to do. It got you an interview. That's the one and only thing a resume is supposed to do, is get you an interview, and it did. So I hope that you all take a moment outside of being freaked out about how you're going to do with the interview to do a little happy dance. Because that's really, really important to celebrate those victories. All right, so interview prep. You have an interview coming up, right? How do you prep? How do you make sure that you are totally ready? Well, you could research the job or the employer more, right? And you should have, one of the things we also recommend is that you research the employer and the job before you apply, but here's an opportunity to do more. Visit the company website, look at LinkedIn, look at Glassdoor, talk to people you know who might work there. ONET, dot ONET is a place to look for jobs and information about details about jobs. Career One Stop. If you could put those links in the chat, that would be great. Our options for researching. And you need to know the skills that they're looking for. You need to check your attitude and you need to look good. So a great way to address the skills they need is either electronically in a word processing document or a spreadsheet or on paper and pencil or via note cards, whatever works for you, is to pick apart the job posting line by line. And sometimes they ask for more than one skill in a bullet point. So put those down one side of the document. And then on the other side of the document, write down how you can show that you have those skills, right? What example from previous employment or a volunteer activity do you have that addresses that skill and shows how you use that skill and what you accomplished? The really important thing is what you accomplished. What did you accomplish by using that skill? And you need to check your attitude, because if it's a virtual interview, if it's a phone interview, if it's an in-person interview, whatever type of interview it is, your attitude will come across. So if this is your first interview, you might be really excited. If this is your 10th interview, you're thinking, it's not going to accomplish anything. This is a futile exercise, and it will come across. It will come across that way. And you should always look your best, right? Jacquilla, is there any, I'm sorry, Naquilla, are there any questions in there?
There are.
I apologize for saying the wrong name.
That's okay. It's Naquilla. That's all right. But we do have a question here. One that we have is, let's see. So when we research the job or the employer, what kind of info are you saying that we need to know?
A good thing to know is the passion or the mission of the organization. We have a colleague who went to an interview for a private company and they asked, why do you want to work here? Anybody who's had an interview had that question asked? Why do you want to work here? Yes or no in the chat? Yeah. So if you know the mission and that registers with you, then you can say, I am really passionate about helping stray animals find good homes, if you were applying for the Humane Society, and the mission of this organization and the function of this organization really address things that are important to me. And then if you also go to the website, you can find out about company culture. So if they're really big in letting their employees volunteer, you can say how that is important to you. If they recently were very successful in a bid for a job, you can say, I feel that I can work and help the company succeed in this bid. And you would find out things like that if you do a Google search and find out if they're in the news. Other questions?
Yes, Sandra. So are you saying that the participants should create a spreadsheet of their skills and should they send that out to the employers?
No, no, no. I'm just saying it's a way of organizing how you get ready for your interview, right? What I do is I take a Word document, I cut it in half in columns. In the left-hand column, I write down what the job posting is asking for. And then in the right-hand column, I put the sorry about that, about the stories that I can tell that will demonstrate those skills. So now, everybody, sorry about that. Everybody thinks differently. And so you can do it in a spreadsheet, you can do it in a Word document, you can do it in a piece of paper. And that way you should have also one or two stories for the skill that the employer is asking for, because that one story might be able to be workable for more than one point in the job description. And so you need to have different examples. So an example would be if a job posting said ability to do data and efficient and correct data entry, right? So then the skill that I would put on the left side would be data entry. And then on the right side, I would talk about a project where I was responsible for entering all the details needed for a government website for 1,000 participants. And my accuracy rate, so I had 90% accuracy rate. I did it in this amount of time. So those would be stories that I could tell or examples I could give that would show how I had that skill that was needed or listed on the job posting. They already know that you can do the job because that's why you got the interview. Remember, your resume sold you. Your resume said to a future employer, yes, this is someone who can do what we need done. They have the skills that we are asking for. Now you have to prove it. And they're also looking for attitude, like, how do you solve problems? How do you work with other people? Because the interview is all about finding a team member, somebody to work with, right? And that's another reason to check your attitude. How many people out there, yes or no in the chat, have worked with somebody who hasn't made the day pleasant, right? Who's a downer? How many people have worked with a downer? Right. And you wouldn't want them on your team again, right? And you don't want to be that person, right? And how many people, yes or no in the chat, have worked with somebody who just is skating by, who's not really doing their job, right? Okay. And so nobody wants to hire that person. Nobody intentionally hires that person. And so through your examples, you not only are showing in an interview that you have the skill, but you're saying what you can accomplish with that skill. What can you add to the bottom line for that person who is looking to employ you? Because you don't want to be that person, right? So you have to have energy, positive attitude, and you have to show results. How did you use what you know how to do to get results? It's all about return on the bottom line, even for government jobs, right? What can you accomplish? That's what's important. There are many, many kinds of interviews, and this has skewed a little bit since COVID. A phone screening is usually done by HR. It's usually done just to make sure that you are an articulate human being, that you can say yes, that you have this experience. Phone interviews, just like any other type of interview, can be scheduled. I applied for a job in August of one year. I got a call in October by a gentleman asking me if I was available for a phone screening. I had to ask what job, and this is where it helps to be organized with your applying system. He told me the job, and I realized I hadn't applied for that recently, but it was in August. I said, I'm not available, let's schedule. So we scheduled it for the next day. That gave me time to get my resume out. What resume did I submit, right? Because you're always tweaking your resume just a itty bit for each job posting that you're applying for. I got my cover letter out. I got the job posting out. So when I was asked questions, I could respond like I knew what I was talking about. And even if you apply for a job today and you get a phone call tomorrow, it's still okay to schedule, because you need to be in a quiet place. You need to be somewhere where you won't be interrupted. You need to be somewhere where you have good phone service. Back in the day, you were tethered to a wall with your phone and your service was pretty much uniform. But nowadays, you can be in different places and have different levels of service. So you want to make sure that you have good phone service. You want to make sure your phone is charged if you're only using a cell phone. And you want to make sure before you even send out applications that the voicemail message on your phone is professional. Hello, this is, please leave a message. Not, hello there, big boy, this is Abba Baba Baba Boo. Please leave a message if that's something you want to do. Because it's not professional. If you're applying for jobs, you want to make sure that your phone voicemail message is professional and your mailbox, your voicemail box is not full, because they might not leave a message or call back if your voicemail is full. In-person interviews, a lot of times now in between telephone screening and in-person are virtual, which are in a way in person, but you're not going to them. And they're usually with a panel. A lot of companies use Zoom or Teams or Google Meet. So you want to make sure that your technology is up to par, right? You want to make sure that you can do both a picture and sound, and that takes a certain amount of bandwidth. You want to make sure that you're in a quiet place. You want to make sure you're not interrupted. Pets outside the door. You want to make sure that your background or what's seen on the screen is neutral. There are certain questions that people are not legally allowed to ask. Your age, your faith, your political affiliations, your family situation. those are all illegal questions, but you can answer those questions for them by what you have behind you, what artwork you have behind you, if you have family photos behind you, if you're wearing a t-shirt that has writing on it. 80% of communication is nonverbal. So you want to minimize what you give away if you're not wanting it shared. Nyquilla, there were some stuff is there stuff there that we need to answer?
There's a lot of comments. There's no question.
Oh, okay.
Well, actually, one just came in. How do you respond to age-related questions such as, so when was that job? When the last one was 1989 to 1998.
You could say that it was a decade or so ago, or it was in the past. They don't need specifically unless it's a certification that's lapsed. And that certification is important for the job. If that certification is important for the job, you might want to renew it using dislocated worker money. But otherwise, you can be vague. And you can be vague pleasantly, politely, without being combative or negative or it's none of your business type response. And that's why we suggest you only put 10 to 15 years on your resume. And then if you have skills that are appropriate for the position you're applying for from jobs older than that, then you have a category called other professional experience and you list those items. All right. So an in-person it's really an opportunity to shine. In-person selection and behavioral are all the same type of interview. There might be 1 or 2 or 3 interviews in the process. I was just part of an interview process where we did virtual interviews, then we did on-site interviews, and we still had an issue figuring out who to hire. So we then gave all the candidates a group of 3 questions and had them do a presentation to the full board. So there are different ways, different companies and different organizations handle those. And we'll talk more in depth about behavioral in a minute. Work sample is if you're going for a welding job, they might have you weld. If I was applying for a training job, they might have me do a sample presentation. My husband was assistant dean at a college at the university. When they hired new faculty, the candidates had to give a sample class to all the tenured faculty in the department as part of their job interview. Group or peer interviews. A group interview, you might be interviewed with more than one person applying for the job. A peer interview could be something as simple as lunch. So you have an in-person interview and they say, okay, now we're going to go for lunch. But you always have to remember from the time you enter the space to the time you are back in your car off the property, all of that is interview. Every single contact with every single person is an interview. You have to remember that. So you be nice, be pleasant. When you're sitting in the waiting room, if you have an in-person interview, don't be talking on your phone. If it's at all possible, leave your phone in the car. If you're having a virtual interview, put your phone in another room. And I even have to take off or turn off notifications on my phone, I mean on my watch, because I've become Pavlovian. My wrist buzzes and I look, right? And you don't want to do that in the middle of an interview. All your attention should be right there on the screen with the people who are interviewing you. Yep.
Well, there's a comment / question that came in. Okay. Now, isn't that essentially working for free depending on what you ask for?
A work sample. And I've heard people have issues or problems with this. Somebody was asked to set up something, they didn't get the job, and then she found out later that they used her structure for managing a project. There's really no way around it unless you want to be really simple and really generic, but they're legally able to ask you for a work sample, especially if it relates directly to your job. And sometimes you can have work samples in a portfolio, but I know that sometimes that's even hard because the information you have as priority belongs to the company. The word just dropped from my head. But so then you do something with a spreadsheet that you made without the information in it and without any clues to the company that you did it for, which would be kind of hard if you've had the same job for 20 years and they would know, but you don't share anything that would give a competitor a disadvantage during the interview process. So you want to communicate your best interest, right? Nothing fancy with your clothes, no t-shirts with wording or logos on them. You find out about the company culture and the dress code by visiting the website, talking to people that are there. Tone down the makeup, tone down the jewelry, no loud neon tie if you're deciding to wear a tie. It's unless you're doing a creative job, right? So if I was applying for a training position with a company that trains creativity, I might go ahead and put a semi-permanent dye in my hair, so then it wouldn't be so white, right? But yeah, and you shouldn't be applying for jobs you don't really want. So yeah, and I like to say show and sharing instead of telling, because if at all possible you want to have a conversational mode and you want, if it's possible, to get them to talk. Always start positive and end positive, and always follow up. And we'll talk about that too. But you want to, they'll a lot of times you'll know that the interview is 45 minutes. They might tell you that there's going to be 10 questions and there'll be time at the end for you to ask questions. So it's your job to meter and work through that with your answers. So you're not going to give a 10-minute answer to question number one, because that leaves you a little bit of time only with the other ones and no time for questions. And then when you finish up, you want to summarize your strength and the qualities and why you are the best fit for the job. And you want to ask a couple questions, and that will be one of the pieces of information that's sent to you as follow-up, is possible questions to ask at the end. All right, so one of the questions is, it's called the sandwich method. It's a great way for handling the tough questions. For those of you who have had interviews, put in the chat some of the weirdest questions that you've had. Nobody's had weird questions? How about just any question at all?
Sorry about that. I was responding to.
No, that's fine. Yes, I'm looking.
Here. Let's see.
How many milkshakes are sold in China each year? As many as the people want who are like milkshake. And there was something about a fruit. somebody said, tell me what, if you were going to be a fruit, what would be your fruit, or what's your favorite fruit? Yeah. The bottom line, you want to read, is there something to read? Quilla, Quilla, Quilla. I'll get it.
There.
I'm dyslexic, and my dyslexia goes to sounds. So I have it written out phonetically, but I transpose the sounds in my head. So that's why I keep butchering your name. I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's all right.
So what was the one about fruit? Oh, okay.
If you were a fruit, what kind would you be?
Okay, and how do you react to tough situations? When they ask general questions like that, I would take a tough situation and show how you work with it. I just wouldn't say generally, I'm calm, I'm cool, I multitask, I'm a creative problem solver. I would always give a specific example. So the sandwich method is that you say something positive, you say something, the negative thingy, and then you say something positive again. So if I was given, how do you react in tough situations? I would say something about, so to start positively, to me, the most important thing is getting the project done and getting it on time and getting it done to the best quality of my ability. There was a situation where I was working on a project with a team, and there was a lot of confusion, and we weren't going to get it done by the deadline, which was really not cool. And so as a team, we rallied together, figured out what still had to be done, addressed those activities to different people's strengths, reassigned the components of the project. And by doing this, we were able to finish the project on time to a high quality, and we're able to deliver results to management. So I start something positive and I end it with positive because people remember the first thing they heard and the last thing they heard. And by anticipating questions, you can Google that, and I'll show you in a little bit how to use AI to possibly do that. Sorry. So yeah, you always want to be brief. You always want to be honest, and you want to specifically focus on the skills that were asked for in the job posting. And that's where that chart, where you dissected the job posting, and then you put your experience and your examples. So all of your examples can specifically address the skills in the job posting. That's the most important thing, to address what's in the job posting. So here's just another visual. The bun is the positive, the insides are the negative, and then the bottom part of the bun is the positive. And you can use condiments on the top of the negative and the bottom of the negative. Those would be your transition. So it's not this, then this, then this. It's this happened flowing into this, the problem flowing into the resolution. Most of your questions can be answered better with the STAR method, right? So what was the situation? What was the task that you had to complete? What were the actions that you took, and what were the results? The most important place to put your time is the action and the results, right? So what is the situation? What are the tasks that you were asked to do? And how did you accomplish those? And what were the results? It's just like on your resume, you need to have bullet points that are accomplishment statements. In your answers in an interview, you have to have accomplishments or results. So one of the questions might be, and I have a list coming up. So is there any question about this?
I haven't seen any that come in
You
yet.
should
No.
always read what AI generates. Always read. My favorite example is one of the upper managements here. We were at a meeting and they were interviewing for a position, and he talked about how one of the candidates read this answer. They were obviously reading the answer. A lot of state jobs, you get the questions ahead of time. The candidate must have put the questions into AI and said, how do I answer this? So it was obvious that they were reading the answer. And then when they got to the end, they looked up at the panel and said, oh, that's not true. So AI had generated an answer to a question that didn't apply to that individual's experience. Yep. You have
So what
another.
do you do if you can't think of a situation that they've asked about? How do you pivot?
So the situations don't only have to be from your work life. They could be from volunteering, a family situation, um, a different place in your life, what you do. There's always a way to semantically move something into an example for something else. And can you think of a question that you wouldn't have an example for? I think if you do the breakout of the question, the points with your experience, and you might not have an example right away, but in the sense of brainstorming, when you go down to the third bullet point and you have an example, it might remind you of something that you have for the first bullet point. That's why prep is so important, because you're actually mining your memory. And when you write it down, there's research that says when you write something down, you remember it better. So I don't believe that there's a situation, a question that you would be asked, and I might be just, thinking in the clouds. I don't think that there's a question that you would be asked that you don't have some type of experience that you could repackage to illustrate that point. And that becomes easier when you prep, right? When you Google what questions could be asked for this job, we'll send you questions. I'll show you how to use AI. You just do the dissection. The more that you prep, the more that you'll be ready for weird questions. Do you have anything to add to that?
Just like you said, Sandra, I mean, if it's something that, if we're made aware of it, preparation is just always key. If there's something that, we are not made aware of in advance to where we can prepare for it, like you had mentioned, sticking to the STAR method. There's many different situations that one can partake in, and whether it is related to a personal life situation, if it's related to work or school or anything like that, I would always try to come up with that and then stick to those key points to be able to um, dissect it the best way that I could, and then just run down each of those bullets to be able to respond
Yeah,
appropriately to what's asked.
right. And I want to acknowledge that being spontaneous or feeling spontaneous in your answers is harder for introverts than it is for extroverts. And so, extroverts will just talk until they think they filled the air. And, they just say sometimes what comes off the top of their head, and they're hoping that they hit the bullseye, where introverts are more metered and thoughtful and need more time to process. And so if you're an introvert or an ambivert, which is both doing a little bit of both, you need to be even more prepared because you don't have that processing time in the interview. You need to process ahead of time. And I understand that that's difficult. So if I was an introvert, I would even work on doing interviews with friends or family members or contacting your career force office. And there's somebody there who can do mock interviews because it's easier when you hear yourself talking, right? You hear yourself talking, you hear your organized thoughts coming out, and the more you practice it, the easier it will be. So introverts have a little harder road to hoe. And that's why you just need to practice, practice, practice. And I would practice with another person, be it virtually or in person, or even do different kinds. Do a couple phone practices, do some virtual practices, do some in-person practice. But the more you practice, the more internal and muscle memory it will be, and the less processing time you'll need. And you might even just acknowledge it. So if you come across a question that you can't answer at the time because you can't think of anything, say, could I come back to that question? Ask for that. Another way to solve for time is that green oval in the after prepare is to do a 1-sentence summary. 1-sentence summary might take 10, 15 seconds, but that gives you thinking time, right? So those are 2 tactics that you can use to do that. If you really feel that you would be lying by changing a situation, you could say, right now, I can't think of anything specific to address that situation, but here's an example of a similar situation that I addressed. So yeah, and then you can also ask for a couple seconds to think. You could start out, when they say, tell us about yourself, you could say, I'm an introvert, or you could say, I know that I need a couple seconds processing time. So please understand if there's a pause before I answer, I'm processing your question so I can answer it to the best of my ability. Someone should go to Toastmasters. It's a great organization. Great organization. All right. So here are some questions, right? We already asked people if they've tell me about yourself. Why are you interested in working in this company? So we already talked about those questions, and you can, when they say tell me about yourself, you're not asking that I'm the oldest of 6 kids. My mother died when I was 12. I ended up taking on that role in the household and taking care of my siblings. I was able to scrape enough money to go to college. It took me 20 years, but I did it. I have a degree, and now I'm interested in entering the workforce. Everything you say and tell me about yourself needs to address a point in the job description. If I was applying for a training job, I would say I have 10 plus years of experience delivering presentations about subjects from A to Z, working with a wide variety of subject matter experts. I did a class for Central Valley College, a community ed class about accounting and 3 levels. And I worked with an accountant and was able to produce a really high level interactive accounting class which the students really enjoyed taking. You should always, always, always address one or more or three of the skills that are in the job posting, because this interview is all about selling you. Why you're interested in the company is interviewing, talking to people who work there, Glassdoor, LinkedIn, company website. Has anybody been asked what is your major weakness? Yes or no in the chat.
And it looks like most of our participants have.
Cool. So you can use the sandwich method, or you can use the star method. One of the things I often use, for example, is I really, really love, I personally am a lifetime learner. If somebody would pay me and support me, I would go to school year round. I just love, love, love learning. What I learned by teaching a class, a 6-week soft skill class at Stillwater Prison for over 3 years, through an assessment that I took called True Colors, is that I'm green. So I truly am, green is all about knowledge. And what I learned by affirming that information is that in the past, I had been either up to a deadline or a little bit over a deadline in getting a project done. By knowing that I'm into research and knowledge, I now have 2 deadlines for every project. I have a deadline where I need to stop researching. It doesn't mean that I don't actively take in new information or ask questions if I'm up against a wall, but I stop doing really in-depth, deep research. And then I have the actual deadline of the project. And ever since I've had that epiphany, I have never been late for a project deadline. And in fact, many times I've been ahead. I still deliver the same quality with a lot less of the stress. Right? So I started positive and I ended positive. I talked about what actions I took and how I used what I learned. Has anybody been asked about your strengths? Yeah. So that would be the same thing. You talk about your strength, but you talk about how you used it and what were the results. Right? The most time to answer any question needs to be spent on action and results. Has anybody been asked, where do you see yourself in 3 years? Yeah. If you present like I do, with white hair or wrinkles, you don't want to say retired. Even if that might be true, you don't ever want to say that. You might say, being a valued member of this team and seeing what other opportunities are in the company for me to advance my career and to help the company. It's a sneaky way to get to ageism and to figure out what you want to do. Is there anything else about this before we go to the next thing? Okay, so I'm going to show you a real brief example on how to use AI. All right, so this is the free version of ChatGPT. A couple hints is to remember that it's a conversation. So you only need to put in some information once, and you can continuously ask questions, and it will remember. Also, up in the upper right-hand corner, there's my initials, SA. When you click on that, you go to settings, and you're gonna every now and then have to delete all previous conversations, because if you use it a lot, because it's a free version, you don't have a lot of storage. All right, so I'm gonna ask it, what questions would I be asked during a first interview for this position? And then I paste in the position. They might or might not ask you these questions, but it's a great way to practice. Are you seeing this? Yep, I'm sharing. Okay. And it might help you come up with examples. It might help you prep for a question that they ask that's similar. And then what you can do is how would I answer these questions using the STAR method? Hold on a minute. I'm going to put in method using this resume. And then I put in my resume, and I'm going to put in the questions. So it delineates it out for you: situation, task, action, results. It might have made assumptions based on the information I gave it, but that's why you never take anything as gospel truth from ChatGPT, and you always tweak it. And what I can do is I could say, rewrite the answers in the same tone as my resume. And it will make it sound more like the tone of my resume, which I did. So that's one of the ways that you can use ChatGPT or another AI service to help with your interview prep. How many of you have an interesting story to share if you're asked about why you left your last job? Yes or no in the chat. You don't have to tell me the story, just yes or no. Okay. If you do, Those are very personal and individual ways of answering that question. And that's one of the best reasons to reach out to your local career force office, because they can help you with that. And the more you practice it, the easier it will be to answer. And yeah, layoff is layoff, right? So, but yeah, so if it has a little bit of emotion attached to it, negative emotion attached to it, it's definitely an answer you need to practice. And you can practice it with somebody at a career force office, and they will help you get through that. So you can project it positively. So you can start positive and end positive. That's really important. All right, post-interview steps. You want to, if they ask you for references, you never want to give a reference that you haven't talked to. Always contact your references directly after the interview. Send them your resume, your cover letter if you submitted one, the job posting, and do a recap of the interview so they know what kind of questions they'll be asked. Always provide references that are applicable to the job. So if I'm applying for a training job, I would not give them a reference of when I planned events, right? Because I'm not applying for an event planning job. I'm applying for a training job. Always send thank yous. And I've talked to multiple HR people, and thank you email is fine. If you want to double duty it, also send one in mail. The nice thing about a mail thank you is if it's a nice picture that they like, they might put it up in their office, and then there'll be a remembrance for you. But you will be better than 80% of applicants if you submit a thank you letter. It's really important to do that. All right. So I'm going to stop sharing. I want everyone to put in the chat one thing that you learned in the last hour-ish that you didn't know coming in. What is one thing that you learned? Put it in the chat.
We have a lot of participants that was not familiar with the AI chat GPT. So they are thankful for that.
Cool.
Also the STAR method.
Yep, your phone message should be it should not be generic. It should be your voice, and it should be professional. All right, now I want you to type in the chat one thing you're going to do between now and Friday that you learned. What is one thing you're going to do between now and Friday based on what you learned?
Play around with chat GPT.
It can become addictive, so you might want to set a timer.
Somebody's going to change their phone greeting.
Cool.
And set up an appointment for a mock interview.
Great.
Draft a few challenging interview questions. Practice interview questions.
Awesome. Cool. So you all have an action plan. You know what you're going to be doing. Are there any other questions? We have 4 more minutes or 3, depending on which clock I'm looking at.
The chat is going pretty fast. I have to scroll up. Let me see.
Yeah, so you will get this PowerPoint, and you will get a lot of different handouts in an email as follow-up. And please check out your career force office. We're in this job because we want to talk to people, we want to help people. And if you don't reach out, it's not an exciting day.
I'm still scrolling just to see if there's any questions that I missed.
I think we got it all.
I believe so.
Yeah. So remember to celebrate when you get the interview. Don't panic, and to practice, right? Those are the two key giveaways. Celebrate and practice. So, right. And so if stress makes it impossible to think on your feet, then practice, practice, practice. And then somebody can review your resume at your local career force office, and you'll find that in the handout that is sent to you. Cool. All right, folks.
Yeah.
Have an awesome week, what remains. And I know that soon you will find your dream job. Good luck, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.